We are several days into President Trump taking office for his second term, and the president has not wasted any time getting back to work. Trump has signed a flurry of executive orders to kick off his agenda, and here's what's been on the docket: issuing immigration crackdowns, ending birthright citizenship, pulling the U.S. out of the World Health Organization and Paris Climate Treaty, and pardoning January 6th insurrectionists. So how are Americans reacting to Trump's slew of changes? We're going on the record with Scott Tranter, Director of Data Science at Decision Desk HQ. Scott, a new poll from Reuters Ipsos found that 47% of Americans approved of Donald Trump's presidency after his inauguration. And these figures are higher than what we saw in his first term. So what do you think has contributed to these higher numbers?
Well, so that poll was taken the weekend leading up to Inauguration Day, which was just a few days ago. He's obviously made a lot of news, done a lot of things, from his perspective, kept a lot of promises. So what will be interesting to see is when we see those numbers 2 weeks from now, do they go up? Do they go down? Look, a lot of the stuff he's done has been red meat stuff that he has been talking about on the trail. So voters should have expected these things. We'll see if they actually approve him as they go down. But as you pointed out, he starts at a better position favorability wise and approval wise than he did when he in his first term.
Pretty significant, but Trump pardoning January 6th insurrectionists has made headlines this week, to put it lightly. Going back to that same poll, 58% of respondents said that Trump should not pardon all people convicted of crimes during the January 6th assault on the Capitol. So what has the public pushback been like?
So we've seen quite a bit of punditry on this. I think a lot of the January 6th stuff, which is something that the Harris campaign made a centerpiece of her presidential candidacy, it's important to voters, but it's not a top three thing. I don't necessarily think we're going to see a lot of independent or Republican voters, which, would have to support that, be part of that 58% that you put up, really change their opinion a whole lot. You're going to hear them express disappointment, as we've seen some members of Congress do, but I think they're going to focus on more the main economic and immigration issues going forward. Although, if some of these people start creating headlines after the fact because they were pardoned, this issue could be something that Donald Trump's going to have to answer for over the next few weeks or months.
Yeah, a new Gallup poll, though, shows that satisfaction with U.S. democracy has edged up from a record low. 61% of Americans remain dissatisfied with the way our democracy currently is in the U.S. 34% are satisfied, up from the record low of 28% last year. So why are Americans slightly shifting to be more satisfied?
So when we dig into those numbers, a large part of that is coming from Republican voters who were disappointed in the process and disappointed in their government over the last year, and they got the candidate they wanted. So that's where we see a lot of that fluctuate up. I think the better number, though, is that's well below 50%. As you pointed out, it is certainly higher than it was before, but still the vast majority, it's a bipartisan agreement. People aren't necessarily happy with their government.
Yeah, that's a good point as well. A recent Associated Press NORC poll found about 8 in 10 U.S. adults favor deporting all immigrants living in the U.S. illegally who have been convicted of a violent crime, with 2/3 of respondents strongly in favor. And then you have 7 in 10 supporting deporting all immigrants living in the U.S. legally who have been convicted of a violent crime. So it seems like Americans are pretty on board with this agenda. But how do you see this playing out over time?
Well, look, it's when you ask this in a polling question in a vacuum, if someone has committed a crime and they're here illegally, should we deport them? That's a pretty easy yes. What may or may affect that opinion going forward is how heavy-handed the Trump administration takes this. Because once you deport the tens of thousands of illegal immigrants who've committed a crime, and you start getting into the millions of people who simply just crossed here illegally, so therefore technically they committed a crime, but are paying taxes and working part of society, that's where we may see public opinion change. But right now, the Trump administration's doing the easy part. We'll see whether or not those numbers hold over the next couple months.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And one major part of Trump's platform during his re-election campaign was his vow to end taxes on tips. And there's a new Associated Press NORC poll that found 54% said they strongly or somewhat back eliminating taxes on earnings from tips. Is there a plan in place for Trump to follow through on this campaign promise? Do you see it happening?
It's certainly something that they're going to try and bring up in this reconciliation bill, which, depending on who you talk to, it's one bill, two bills. The speaker said he wants to get it out in May. But the other thing that legislators have to take in mind is if you reduce taxes on tips, you've got to have a pay for, right? That's less revenue to the government. So you got to cut a subsequent program because there are deficit hawks on the other end saying, hey, I want to put more money in the pocket of people, but we can't increase the deficit in the government. So what program are we going to cut? I think this initiative ultimately will get passed, but it will be interesting what other tax cuts may or may not stick around because of it, or what other government programs may be cut because of it.
Yeah, there definitely could be some sacrifices. Looking ahead here, though, there's less than 6 months until the New Jersey gubernatorial primaries, and a new Emerson College poll shows a little over half of primary voters are still undecided. And interestingly, the incumbent, Democrat Phil Murphy, has a lower favorability rating than President Trump. And according to Emerson, Murphy holds a 44% favorable rating, while Trump holds 48% in the state. Is this a sign to you that Republicans could potentially flip the governor's mansion red? I mean, that would be a pretty big deal in New Jersey.
Absolutely. Look, New Jersey is one of those states that has been reliably Democratic over the last 15, 20 years. Except for, occasionally they will elect a Republican governor like Chris Christie, who, depending on who you talk to, is a pretty moderate Republican governor. New Jersey, though, in this past presidential election, shifted right about 7 points toward Donald Trump. As you point out, the approval rating for Donald Trump's higher than the Democratic governor. I expect the Republican primary there to be pretty contested. And I think the Republican candidate, win or lose, is going to be within a couple points, which is going to be the closest gubernatorial race we've seen in that state in probably 15 years.
Yeah, that will definitely be an interesting one to watch. Before we let you go, Scott, we are also about a week away from the DNC chair election. Who do you have your money on?
Look, Wickler has certainly gotten all the endorsements, has been doing the rounds on the MSNBCs and all those types of things. This is one of those things. There's a lot of candidates. Endorsements may or may not matter given how the DNC elects their folks, especially considering they want an outsider, not necessarily an establishment. I think it's anyone's game, although Wickler's probably the slight favorite here.
Scott Tranter, thank you so much for your insight.
Thanks for having me.
That's it for What's America Thinking. I'm Bianca Facchinei. Please come back next week and be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hills YouTube channel.